Hey there, Megan Jansen with Employee Wellness Solutions Network. I'm still on a year-long mission to talk to as many people as I can as we continue this conversation and elevate the profile of employee and corporate wellness. And today we're talking about financial wellness and financial stress, actually. I've tracked down Ryan Vandelar. Ryan, you're a certified financial planner, you're a coach, you're a retirement specialist with Libro Credit Union, and I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy day for me.
No, thank you. It's happy to be here. There's a lot of observations and lessons that I learned, so anytime I have the opportunity to share them, I'm more than willing. So.
Awesome. And you've been in this industry a while. You've seen probably some really interesting trends that we'll get into today, certainly. What is the relationship, in your opinion, between finances and wellness?
So I'd have to say that it's more based on the use of capital, and the textbook will pretty much tell you that there's two predominant types of people that use money. You've got your users and you've got your savers, and you need both. And certainly those that are struggling with wealth, if it's relating to finances, has to do with really the users and the frequency with which they're using and whether they're overusing and really how off balance they are. So I think that there's a lot that can be learned, just like I said, with the meetings I've had, and asking a lot of questions. I was very, very curious with how some of my clients obtain their wealth, and it just amazed, and these was a blue collar part of the city. It's not like these were doctors and lawyers and people that received inheritance. These were people that genuinely just were very, very disciplined and built their wealth on their own. And in a time where money is very, very cheap and temptation is very, very high, I think there's a lot that we can learn from the baby boomers and our ancestors as to how they got their wealth. So
are you seeing certain trends, I guess, in today's circumstances with people spending more than they have, getting into trouble financially, and this terrible cycle continuing? Are you seeing many commonalities maybe around what's going on today? And then we'll get into baby boomers and Gen X's.
Yeah, if you're a user, you're very comfortable with spending and not wanting to wait and wanting that purchase for today, not willing to go through a time or trial. So you just have to look at the debt to income ratios that are the stories that are coming out, both in Canada and the US. So the debt load is very high. And then, there were a lot of families that were going through the same 3-year cycle. So they would come in and refinance their mortgage because they had used up their line of credit or loans, or spending just got out of control and having to come in and refinance their house. So meanwhile, there were also those savers at the same time, diligently saving, putting money aside, investing money, and then watching their wealth grow. And absolutely, it's I don't want to say it's an epidemic, but it's certainly more challenging today than it probably was, again, for our first generation that came here.
So let's talk about that. What can we learn from the baby boomer generation?
So if the stories that I've heard, just again having to deal with war and hard times, and if you have anyone that has a grandparent or not really from that generation, sit down and visit them and ask them what it was like, because it's again, it's really remarkable what they had to survive through, coming here with no money and children going to school with applesauce sandwiches, and really they were just the master of the word no. And if they didn't have it, they didn't spend it. Like there's nothing today that's going to be super enlightening. It's more of what we've heard over and over and over again. But yeah, they just mastered. They said no, and they wouldn't pay for something unless they had the money to do that. So there was no credit, there was no debit machines, it was just very, very boring. They were very simple. I would say simplicity, and if I've got a couple things that are steroids for your net worth, simplicity is one of them. They were comfortable with a simple life. They weren't so much worried about what other people thought. They weren't worried so much about their neighbors and having the latest technology and the latest fashions and having to go out and entertain themselves all the time. They said no, and they were content with simplicity, and they didn't have to please others.
So that keeping up with the Joneses mentality is something that in your profession you still see probably a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's still a concern, and it's sad because the opinions of those people do not matter, yet we're still trying to impress them, whether through Facebook or social media. I think social media certainly has contributed to that. And I would also say the third is divorce. That's a big crusher to your net worth, and certainly beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But it's, if you can make your marriage work, that's certainly you'll be your well-being will be happy all around, right?
Talking about, I also find another difference between our parents' generation and this generation is back then it didn't seem like, or maybe families did talk about finances. And today, in some cases, it does seem to be maybe not spoken about as much around the dinner table.
So
what are your thoughts on that?
I've learned, again, baby boomers gone through a hard time. The next generation comes in, and this is the Generation X, has suffered those hard times and have learned the lessons from their parents, and they're a little bit better at their savings, but they're a little bit more liberal with their spending, so they're a little bit more balanced. And yeah, by the time the third generation comes, they've not seen anything, they've not witnessed anything, they've not gone through any hard times, and they're the benefactors of all that sacrifice and hard work. And yeah, they're the ones who need the most education on how to handle this wealth and how to make it survive. Because history shows by the time it gets to the fourth generation, it's gone. It's normally wiped out. So.
Really? So having these conversations early with our children is
Yes.
critically important, you feel?
Yeah, and I'll tell a story. Like, stepdaughter's just started babysitting, so she's turning 13, going into grade 8, and trying to land her first gig. And we printed some flyers and had her go around her neighborhood, and it was great to see instant reaction of someone calling and hiring her. And she came home with her first $20 yesterday, and you had the lesson of teaching her about tax and how right away $2 of that or $4 of that has to be given to taxes. And you could see the look on her face with how miserable she was, and
yeah,
and just like trying to ask their mom, really, is this true? I'm like, this is real life, and so I think you can teach children those lessons from an early age. And I'm not going to go and spend the money. She doesn't know when I'm going to spend it, but if I put it to a side and it's for her good and give it to her later on, you could certainly teach your kids that. You can teach your kids even interest. If they come home and earn $100, give them $5 to match it in the form of interest to teach them the benefit of saving.
I love that. And only spend what you can afford. That's another, I think, tip. All of us have to understand, I think.
Saying no is a very healthy word.
Yeah.
If you are not feeling well, it's directly tied to how frequent you say no. So I would say that even with teaching my children that, yeah, a budget is simply saying no more than you say yes. And if you're owing money and you cannot pay your credit card in full every month, then you're saying yes too frequently.
Great point. Yeah, it's a great point. Any other observances as we look at tying up this discussion? I think we need part B, part C, part D of this very important topic. But do you see any other things in your line of work that would be helpful to share? Stories, examples, strategies?
So again, baby boomers and first generation, they still use cash. Right, so the only reason why they have a debit card is so they don't have to wait in line to get their cash from a teller. But everything, and again, I've read studies that show that when you're using cash, it's triggering the same part in your mind as pain. So you actually feel pain when you're handing cash to a teller. But when you use plastic, you don't feel that. There's nothing inside your brain that is giving pain. That's why it's so easy to tap and swipe. And so certainly, I think, again, just an old school practice, use cash if possible. Have one credit card amongst the household, and again, you don't need to have 5 or 6 point cards. Pick your favorites and use cash if possible if you find spending is getting out of control. I would also say try not to be so I guess, motivated to purchase because something's on sale. You find the grocery stores are very good at comboing and 3 for $5 or 2 for $10 and just drawing you to the tags. And I had one conversation with a client, and he'd show me his receipt and say, well, I saved $100. I was so happy I bought all these things and I saved $100. And the first question I asked is, do you need those things? And he said, no. So I go, you didn't save anything. You spent $100. If you would have not spent anything, that's the savings. There has to be some sacrifice. There has to be some suffering with savings. So there's a difference, I think, between sales and savings. And it's directly tied to the sacrifice it takes to put money aside. So I would say that let the need trigger the need for a sale. Don't let a sale motivate you to buy something and try to convince you that you need it.
Those red or yellow tags, those definitely draw you in. There's no question.
Yep, absolutely. We all fall victim to it, right? It's just, oh, that's such a great price. I got to do a limited time offer. Take a step back. If it's really something that you want to buy, then, again, first generation, they're very patient. So they'll go home, they'll wait a few months, they'll save up the cash to purchase it, and then they'll spend it with their cash. Do you have to buy it that very moment? Again, this is where no becomes a very, very healthy response. So,
excellent. Great conversation. Some really great tips and strategies, Ryan. Thank you so much for sharing all you know. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.